brother?
What is my day job? I
Yes.
teach half-time at Phoenix Seminary in Arizona, great institution, and we train pastors, counselors, missionaries. And then the rest of the time I write and speak about things that I've written.
Well, Dr. Grudem, you're probably very well known, I think, to a lot of people in the evangelical community. One of the discussions that's been going on for the last half dozen years is, well, more than that, but has really come to the forefront. What should evangelical Christians do about poverty? Now, this book,
Right.
which
About what? About poverty?
About poverty.
Okay.
Now, this book, I want to say again, is excellent. This is like a simplified college course on economics. It is so well done and so simple, even I understood it. And it begins...
No comment.
No, it begins with a question from a Kenyan woman who asked you, why is Africa so poor? And that started you, if I understood how this all unfolded, on a process whereby you sought to answer that question along with Barry Asmus, who's an economist, from a Christian biblical
Right.
position. So why don't you let us in on how that process began and led to this book?
Right. Well, that was several years ago. This woman from Nairobi, Kenya, said, "Why is Africa so poor?" And I couldn't answer her. I was stunned. And I began to work on reading some books about the history of economic development, why some nations have become prosperous and why other nations remain trapped in poverty. And I found that there are actual factors that are common throughout history to nations such as Northern Europe, Britain, United States, Canada, Australia, or Japan or Korea, South Korea. There are factors common to nations that have become wealthy, and there are other factors common to nations, many like this Nigeria or Kenya or Bangladesh or Haiti, other nations that remain very poor. There are other factors, just the opposite, that are common to those. And Barry Asmus, this economist, and I worked together, and as we began to put this together, we discovered, first, that we could lay out these principles that nations can follow to grow in prosperity. And we discovered, second, that they were really in line with many biblical principles that are taught about how people should view the economy, view the nation, view their own work and productivity, and view honesty and truthfulness and hard work and productivity. So it's a combination of economic history and biblical teaching that leads to basically a roadmap of 79 steps that nations can take, and any one of them will begin to help them grow toward prosperity.
The title of the book we're talking about is The Poverty of Nations, a Sustainable Solution. Wayne Grudem is our guest. He's one of the co-authors of the book. So that is a question that I'm glad you've answered it in the book, because that is why some countries are wealthy and why some countries are poor, or some are even poor, and then there's poor. There's extreme.
Yep. And on the cover of the book, we've got a map of the world with different colors on it, and the green is for prosperous countries. The blue is middle income. That would be like Mexico, Brazil, China, Russia, middle income countries. And then the red is poor countries like India. And then the dark red is very poor, and that's Pakistan, Bangladesh. That's many countries in Central Africa, Haiti, in the Caribbean. And why is that? Why have those countries remained very poor? And so we put a color coding to show what the difference was. And, Tim and Ed, you probably like me and like my co-author Barry Asmus, we contribute to these funds that send food aid to poor countries where people are hungry. And we send medical aid and other kinds of help in building buildings, schools, and
Christian charity. That's part
of. We do that,
Yeah.
and so that's a good thing because it meets urgent needs. But what we realize is it doesn't solve the problem.
No,
because if we're sending food to hungry people, it meets the need. But the problem is the country is not producing enough of its own food. And if we're sending medical aid, that meets the urgent need, but the problem is the country is not producing enough of its own medical care. And so what is the solution? How can the countries begin to produce their own goods? And it's not natural resources, because Latin America and Africa and many countries there have abundant natural resources. And then there are some countries like Japan or Taiwan or Singapore that have no natural resources to speak of, and they've become prosperous. So that isn't the solution. The solution, it falls in three areas, and we lay this out in the book. One area is the economic system, and we say they need to have a free market. And the second area is the government, and there the government has to work for the good of the people, not the good of the rulers and his friends and family. And then the third area is what beliefs and cultural values people have in the nation, and those really lead to changes in the in the economy and the government. So those are most crucial. And that's why we say that pastors are very important in poor countries, because they affect how people believe and think about economic issues and government issues.
I want to ask you, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Wayne.
Yeah, that's fine. I could.
This is good. Tim. The Poverty of Nations is the title of the book. It's available wherever wherever books are sold, internet and brick and mortar. The Poverty of Nations. Ed Tagliano, you read most of the book, didn't you, Ed?
Yes.
And highly recommend it.
I do.
Wayne,
did you find it readable, Ed?
I absolutely did. In fact,
so it's not a high academic book that most people can't understand.
In fact, I think they say in it, this book is not written for academics, but it just had common sense examples of how you understand economics. So if I could just give a quick example. One of the things, and this was and I took economics in college. I've forgotten most of it. But you took the example of eyeglasses, and you said, if you have 3 cents raw plastic worth of raw plastic, 5 cents worth of metal, how do you get glasses that cost $200? You take those raw materials, and how did that value increase? And you said, well, skillful human beings take those raw materials, and they make them into something that's worth a lot and can be sold for a lot, and that just, I'm sure there are economics professors out there and others who work in finance all the time who now realize how I'm an idiot for not knowing that. But you take that simple idea and you say, well, then part of the solution is to get someone in Africa who lives in a village. You have to kind of reorient the country to get those people to be able to take raw materials and fashion them into something with much more value than the stuff you pull out of the ground.
Exactly. Well, that's a great illustration, and I use that when I talk about this book publicly, because when the lens crafters store here in my neighborhood, when that guy at the machine puts that kind of, you don't think it's worth anything, little piece of plastic in the machine, and it comes out and it's a bifocal lens that I can read with and see distance with, he's added, each lens adds about $100 of value to the world, to the nation, that didn't exist before. It's adding to the total economic output of the nation. And what we want to say is, for poor countries, when a woman takes cloth and sews it into a shirt, makes the $3 cloth into a $13 shirt, or when a cobbler takes leather and makes a pair of shoes, they are adding value to raw materials and creating prosperity one step at a time. And that's really the secret to how nations grow. And I think from a theological standpoint, that's a God-given ability. The animal kingdom doesn't add value to the materials of the earth and create new products like glasses or
Wayne, I want
shoes.
to ask you, what role did you find in that religion played in this? Because I'm looking at the world map.
Yep.
And this is not absolutely true. There are exceptions. For instance, Japan's not a Christian, has no Christian history really, but is still relatively prosperous. But really, when you look at Western Europe, and you look at North America, and you look at Australia, those are the most prosperous places in the world, and they're also the places where the Christian religion has been dominant, at least over history. So what role did religion, or does religion, or is this all coincidental?
No, it's not coincidental, Tim. It's very significant. You brought up the the example of Japan, and Japan did have a form of Buddhism that really made work into a religion, and so they were driven to work, actually without rest, probably excessively, so that they didn't have the idea of a Christian Sabbath, really. But nonetheless, that is an example where countries can follow good economic principles regarding work and a high value of education and learning from other nations humbly, and
Right.
they can prosper. But by and large, you're right, historically, nations that have historic background in Christianity, and particularly evangelical Protestant Christianity, have prospered most. After the Reformation in 1517 and following, Northern Europe grew economically much more quickly than Southern Europe, because in Northern Europe, Protestants thought it was important to teach their children to read, because they wanted their kids to read, you know what?
The Bible.
The Bible, exactly. And so they taught both their sons and their daughters to read. But in Catholic countries, now they do that today more in Catholic countries, but previously it was an emphasis on the priest being able to teach you what the Bible said, and they didn't emphasize individual people reading as much. And so the Protestant countries, background countries, developed rapidly. Now, a lot of Northern Europe doesn't go to church at all much anymore, but they still got those beliefs and values of value of education, value of hard work and diligence, and by and large honesty and things like that.
Yeah. What exactly is the Protestant work ethic?
Well, it's kind of a collection of ideas, meaning you see your secular work, if you're a blacksmith or a tailor or a farmer, you see that as a calling from God and something that you do as serving the Lord and not men, as Paul says in Colossians. And so you strive to be diligent in your work, you strive to be honest and tell the truth, and you believe in the value of producing goods from the earth, that the earth is orderly and rational and subject to rational investigation. So you try to invent new little machines or other kinds of inventions to help people. And honesty, diligence, thrift, hard work, care for others, those all went into contributing to what's called a Protestant work ethic. And, there might be some details that we would differ on, but overall, that was a good idea. Whereas people had been honest and hardworking individuals before, this was inculcating those values in a whole culture and a whole society, and telling everybody it was the will of God that they were to work and be productive and make useful things or services for the benefit of others.
I did have a text from someone who made this point. They said America was a key in rebuilding Japan after World War II, using the great character of America's Christian heritage. So the Americans,
interesting, isn't it? Our former enemies became our friends.
Yeah, and
they imitated the work ethic.
That's not the norm in world history.
Right.
The norm in world history is for when a country beats down another country, they take their assets and they rule their people.
Yep, we do not do that.
And America does not do that.
No.
Because of America's Christian heritage. Because
there's strong Christian heritage.
That is not the Christian thing to do.
Right.
And that's the only reason that we're different from other. We helped Japan, we helped Germany.
The Marshall Plan after World War II. We poured millions of dollars in.
But it's interesting. We say in the book that the Marshall Plan helped, pretty prosperous countries rebuild after the war. But that really isn't general foreign aid. But foreign aid given by governments and through governments has never brought any nation from poverty to prosperity. Never once.
Well, Dr. Grudem, let me ask